The great ship Convergence floated in the darkness of space like a metal city. Inside its massive halls, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered in what might be their final meeting. The air buzzed with worried voices speaking in many different languages, but they all said the same thing. They were losing the war. Admiral Kethvar stood at the center of the council chamber. His blue skin looked pale under the harsh lights, and his forearms moved nervously as he spoke. The Altarian had seen many battles in his long life, but nothing like what the Zaphirians were doing to the galaxy. "The numbers are clear," Kethvar said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "In 3 standard cycles, the Zaphirian Empire has taken 47 worlds. Their bioships adapt to every weapon we use against them. Our fleets cannot stop them." A soft, clicking sound came from the insect-like delegate from Hive Cluster 7. When she spoke, her words were translated into the common language by the ship's computers. "My people evacuated 6 colonies last week. The Zaphirians took them all within days. Their ships? They learned too fast." Around the room, other delegates nodded with sad agreement. The reptilian Saurid Empire had lost their outer defenses. The gas-breathing Nebulans had abandoned 3 star systems. Even the proud warrior clans of Vega Prime were retreating. Kethvar activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy. Red dots marked Zaphirian-controlled space, and there were far too many of them. The red area was growing like a disease, spreading toward the center where the peaceful worlds lay defenseless. "They are gathering near the Nexus Gate," Kethvar continued. "Our intelligence says they have over 50,000 bioships massing for the final attack. If they take the gate, they control access to all the core systems. 20 billion souls depend on our next decision." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Nexus Gate was the highway to the heart of galactic civilization. Once the Zaphirians controlled it, they could attack any world they wanted while preventing help from arriving. Counselor Vex of the Crystal Coalition stood up slowly. Her transparent body reflected the hologram's red light, making her look like she was made of blood. "Our combined fleet has 8,000 ships. We have the best weapons our science can create. Surely that is enough." Kethvar's expression was grim. "We tried our best weapons on their ships at the Battle of Kepler Station. Their biohulls adapted to our plasma cannons within minutes. By the end of the fight, our weapons were useless. They learned from every attack." A young Altarian officer rushed into the chamber, his face excited but confused. He whispered something into Kethvar's ear that made the Admiral's eyes go wide. "Impossible," Kethvar said out loud. "Check the message again." The officer nodded and ran back to his post. The delegates watched with growing worry. Bad news was common these days, but Kethvar looked like he had seen a ghost. Minutes passed before the officer returned with a datapad. Kethvar read it twice before looking up at the council. "We have received a transmission from beyond the galactic rim," he announced. "Someone is requesting permission to help us fight the Zaphirians." Counselor Vex made a sound like crystal bells ringing. "Who would be out there? The rim is empty space and dead systems." Kethvar's voice was barely above a whisper. "Humans." The reaction was immediate. Some delegates laughed. Others looked confused. The oldest members of the council remembered the humans, but most thought they were just a story from the past. "Humans disappeared 200 years ago," said the delegate from the Spiral Arm Consortium. "They were a primitive species with crude metal ships. Even if some survived out there, what could they possibly do against the Zaphirians?" Kethvar activated the message player. A voice filled the chamber, speaking in the old human language that the computers quickly translated. It was a female voice, calm and confident in a way that made everyone listen. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet," the voice said. "We have been monitoring galactic communications and are aware of your current situation with the Zaphirian Empire. Humanity requests permission to assist in the defense of the Nexus Gate." The message paused, and Admiral Chen's voice became colder. "We have been waiting for a real fight." The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates thought it was a joke. Others worried it might be a Zaphirian trick. A few of the older council members remembered stories about human warfare and looked thoughtful. "Their last known fleet had barely 200 ships," Counselor Vex said. "Ancient technology, simple weapons. What good could they do?" The delegate from the warrior clans of Vega Prime stood up. His scarred face was serious as he spoke. "My grandfather fought alongside humans in the border wars. He said they were different, they fought like they enjoyed it." "That was 2 centuries ago," another delegate argued. Even if humans survived out there, they would still have the same old technology. Kethvar studied the message data more carefully. The transmission source is moving. Our sensors show massive gravitational distortions consistent with a large fleet in hyperspace. They are coming whether we give permission or not. The room fell quiet again. Everyone was thinking the same thing. If the humans were really coming with a fleet, they would find out soon enough what 200 years in the empty darkness had done to them. The Crystal Coalition delegate spoke first. We should accept their help. We have nothing to lose. We have everything to lose, countered the Spiral Arm representative. What if they have become something worse than the Zaphirians? Admiral Kethvar made the decision that would change galactic history. We will send them our fleet positions and battle plans. If the humans want to fight the Zaphirians, we will not stop them. He turned to his communications officer. Send a reply. Tell Admiral Chen that humanity has permission to engage Zaphirian forces. Send them our tactical data and current fleet positions. As the message was sent into space, the council members sat in worried silence. Outside the great ship, stars twinkled peacefully, giving no sign of the war that was about to tear the galaxy apart. In the depths of space near the Nexus Gate, Zaphirian bioships moved like living things. Their hulls pulsed with alien life, and their weapons were already adapting to fight the expected enemy. They had no idea that something completely unexpected was coming. The humans were returning to galactic space, and they had spent 200 years learning how to fight wars that others thought were impossible to win. The Zaphirians were about to discover that evolution was not the only path to power. In her command ship somewhere in hyperspace, Admiral Chen studied the tactical data from the Galactic Council. Her fleet was bigger than anyone expected, and their technology was beyond anything the galaxy had seen. But it was not the ships or weapons that would win this battle. It was the fact that humans had never learned when to quit. Warprime Zekthul felt the pulse of 50,000 minds connected to his own. Each thought from his bioship fleet flowed through the quantum neural network that linked every Zaphirian vessel. It was perfect unity, perfect coordination, and it had never failed them in battle. His flagship, the Living Destroyer, was a creature as much as it was a ship. Its hull was made of biometal that could heal wounds and adapt to any weapon. Inside its organic corridors, Zekthul stood before a wall of living tissue that served as his command center. The wall showed him everything his fleet could see through thousands of compound eyes. The enemy fleet waited near the Nexus Gate like frightened animals. Zekthul counted their ships with contempt. 8,000 vessels from dozens of different species, all using the same predictable technology. Plasma weapons, particle beams, kinetic missiles. The Zaphirian bioships had adapted to counter all of these weapons long ago. They grouped together like prey, Zekthul thought, and 50,000 minds shared his amusement. No imagination, no growth. They will feed our evolution well. Through the neural link, he felt his sub-commanders preparing their bioships for battle. Each vessel was unique, evolved from the genetic material of conquered species. Some had the tough armor of the Silicon Collective. Others had the speed of the Void Runners. A few possessed the energy weapons of the core worlds, improved and made deadly by Zaphirian bioengineering. The bioships moved through space like a living tide. Their hulls shifted and changed color as they prepared for battle. Weapon ports opened like mouths full of teeth. Shield generators that looked like beating hearts began to pulse with protective energy. Zekthul remembered the first time the Zaphirians had encountered galactic civilization. His people had been a small empire then, powerful but limited. The other species had treated them as equals, even invited them to join their councils. They had no idea what a mistake that was. The Zaphirians were not just another species. They were evolution itself made conscious. Every battle taught them something new. Every defeated enemy made them stronger. They absorbed technology, genetics, and knowledge from everyone they conquered. We are what the universe is trying to become, Zekthul thought to his fleet. We are the future devouring the past. His bioship responded to his thoughts by growing larger weapons. The Living Destroyer had started the war as a simple cruiser. Now it was the size of a space station, its hull incorporating the best features of 47 conquered worlds. Through his connection to the fleet, Zekthul felt his ships analyzing the enemy formation. The council forces were arranged in the classic defensive pattern that military schools across the galaxy had taught for centuries: predictable, boring, doomed. The Altarian ships would fire first with their plasma cannons. The bioships would adapt within minutes, making the weapons useless. The Crystal Coalition vessels would try their particle beams next. Again, adaptation would make them harmless. By the time the other species tried their weapons, the Zaphirian fleet would be immune to everything. Then would come the real battle. Bioships would swarm through the enemy formation like predators among helpless prey. They would tear through hulls, consume technology, and add the knowledge of the defeated to the growing Zaphirian mind. Zekthul felt a moment of sadness for his enemies. They fought with such determination, but they could not understand what they faced. The Zaphirians were not just another conquering empire. They were the end result of natural selection applied to warfare itself. "Begin the approach," he commanded, and 50,000 bioships moved forward as one organism. The enemy fleet responded exactly as expected. The Altarian vessels moved into attack formation. Their plasma cannons began to charge. Through the neural network, Zekthul felt his ships preparing to adapt, but something was wrong. His scouts were detecting massive distortions in hyperspace near the battlefield. Something large was coming. Multiple somethings. "Unknown contacts emerging from hyperspace," reported Subcommander Vextal through the neural link. "Gravitational readings are unusual." Zekthul focused his attention on the sensor data. The readings made no sense. The signatures were too large, too powerful. Whatever was coming had energy cores that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. "Increase scan resolution," he ordered. "I want to know what we are facing." The bioships turned their living sensors toward the hyperspace distortions. What they found defied all expectations. Ships were emerging from hyperspace, but not the primitive vessels the Zaphirians expected. These ships were predators. Their hulls were sharp and angular, built for speed and violence. They moved with a grace that reminded Zekthul of hunting creatures from his homeworld. Energy readings showed weapons unlike anything in the galactic database. "How many?" he asked. 10,000 ships, came the reply through the neural network, all of unknown design. For the first time in his species' history, Zekthul felt something he had never experienced before. Uncertainty. The Zaphirians had evolved beyond the need for fear, but this was different. These ships represented the unknown, and the unknown could not be adapted to. A transmission reached his fleet on all frequencies. The voice spoke in an ancient language that the bioship's computers quickly translated. It was calm, professional, and completely confident. "Council forces, this is the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Maintain current positions and prepare for coordinated strike. Zaphirian forces, you have 30 seconds to surrender before we demonstrate why humans don't make idle threats." Humans. Zekthul searched his racial memory for information about the species. They had been a minor power 2 centuries ago. Primitive technology, crude weapons limited to a few hundred ships. The galactic community had dismissed them as unimportant, but these ships were not primitive. They were works of art designed for destruction. Their hulls seemed to bend light itself, making them hard to target. Energy signatures suggested weapons that violated known physics. Through the neural network, Zekthul felt his fleet's confusion. How could a species advance so far in only 2 centuries? What had the humans become during their exile beyond the galactic rim? "Begin adaptation protocols," he ordered. "Prepare to counter unknown weapon types." But even as he gave the command, Zekthul felt a cold certainty growing in his mind. The bioships could only adapt to weapons they had encountered before. These human vessels carried technology that existed outside all previous experience. The 30 seconds passed in silence. Then the human fleet opened fire, and Zekthul learned what 2 centuries of human anger could create. The weapons that reached across space toward his bioships were like nothing the universe had ever seen. They ignored shields, phased through adaptive armor, and struck with the force of dying stars. For the first time since achieving consciousness, the Zaphirian hive mind screamed in pain and surprise. The space around the Nexus Gate had become a graveyard. Broken pieces of council ships drifted in the darkness, their crews either dead or waiting to die. Admiral Kethver watched from the bridge of his flagship as another Altarian cruiser exploded under bioship fire. "Sir, we have lost 40% of our fleet," his tactical officer reported. The young Altarian's voice shook with fear. "The Zaphirian ships are adapting faster than we can change tactics." Kethvar nodded grimly. He had known this would happen, but seeing it was still painful. Every ship they lost was hundreds of good people who would never go home. The bioships learned from each attack, becoming stronger while the Council fleet grew weaker. On the main display, he could see Zaphirian vessels changing their hulls in real time. When plasma fire hit them, their armor grew thicker. When particle beams struck, their shields adapted to deflect the energy. It was like fighting an enemy that evolved during battle. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication station. "We are receiving a priority transmission from long-range sensors." Kethavar turned toward the officer. "What kind of transmission?" "Unknown ships emerging from hyperspace. Massive gravitational distortions detected. Sir, the readings are impossible." The tactical display updated to show new contacts appearing at the edge of sensor range. The numbers climbing on the screen made Kethavar's heart skip a beat. 1,000 ships. 2,000. 5,000. The count kept rising. "How many?" he whispered. 10,000 vessels confirmed, the sensor officer replied. "All of unknown configuration. Energy signatures are off the scale." Around the bridge, his crew stared at the display in shock. 10,000 ships was more than the Council had brought to this battle. But who could field such a fleet? Every major power in the galaxy was already here, or had been conquered by the Zaphirians. The main display shifted to show the new arrivals as they finished emerging from hyperspace. What Kethavar saw made him question his own eyes. These were not the boxy practical ships that most species built. These vessels were works of deadly art. They were sleek and angular like the teeth of some cosmic predator. Their hulls seemed to absorb light, making them hard to see against the starfield. Energy readings showed power cores that put even the largest Zaphirian bioships to shame. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the new fleet." The voice that filled the bridge was speaking an ancient language that the computers quickly translated. It was calm and professional, but there was something underneath it that made Kethavar's skin crawl with recognition. "Council forces, this is the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Maintain current positions, and prepare for coordinated strike." The bridge fell. Silent, humans, the same species, that had vanished beyond the galactic rim 2 centuries ago with barely 200 outdated ships. But these vessels were anything but outdated. The transmission continued. "Zaphirian forces, you have 30 seconds to surrender before we demonstrate why humans don't make idle threats." Kethavar felt his legs go weak. He had heard stories about human warfare from his grandfather, who had fought in the border wars. Humans did not make idle threats. When they promised violence, they delivered it with interest. On the tactical display, he could see the Zaphirian fleet reacting to the human arrival. The bioships were clustering together, their hulls shifting as they prepared to adapt to new weapons. 50,000 Zaphirian vessels against 10,000 human ships. The numbers still favored the enemy. But something about the human formation made Kethavar think the numbers might not matter. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, like dancers who had practiced the same routine for years. Every vessel was exactly where it needed to be for maximum effect. Tactical analysis of human fleet formation, he ordered. His tactical officer worked frantically at his console before looking up with confusion. "Sir, I cannot identify their battle plan." "The formation does not match any known tactical doctrine." Kethavar nodded. That was exactly what he had expected. Humans had never followed anyone else's rules about warfare. They created their own rules and changed them whenever it suited their purposes. The 30 seconds passed in silence that seemed to last forever. The Zaphirian bioships were ready to adapt to any known weapon type. The Council fleet was battered but still fighting. The human ships waited like coiled springs ready to unleash destruction. Then the humans opened fire. What happened next redefined everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. The human weapons did not behave like any technology anyone had ever seen. Beams of coherent dark matter phased through Zaphirian adaptive armor like it was not there. Torpedoes that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions struck targets that should have been protected by shields. But it was not just the weapons. It was the way the humans used them. Their ships moved like living things, dancing between enemy fire while their own weapons found targets with surgical precision. They fought like artists painting a masterpiece of destruction. Kethavar watched in amazement as a human destroyer led its squadron in a run between two massive Zaphirian bioships. The human vessels used the enemy's own bioelectric fields to mask their approach, before unleashing point-blank fire that vaporized both targets. Impossible. his tactical officer whispered. How did they know the bioships would generate that specific field pattern? Another human ship, this one the size of a battle cruiser, performed a maneuver that violated everything Kethavar knew about physics. It seemed to fold space around itself, appearing behind a group of Zaphirian vessels and destroying them before they could react. The bioships tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. Every human weapon was different. Every attack used principles that existed outside known science. The Zaphirians could not evolve to counter technology they could not understand. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "the human admiral is hailing us." The voice that came through the speakers was the same one that had given the surrender ultimatum. Calm, professional, but now with a hint of satisfaction. "Admiral Kethavar, this is Admiral Sarah Chen. We suggest you pull your forces back to a safe distance. This will be over shortly." Kethavar found his voice. "Admiral Chen, how is this possible? Your weapons, your ships." There was a pause before Chen replied. "We had 200 years to think about warfare, Admiral. We got very good at it." On the tactical display, Kethavar could see the human fleet systematically dismantling the Zaphirian formation. Bioships that had seemed invincible minutes before were being destroyed faster than his computers could count them. The humans were not just winning. They were demonstrating that the Zaphirian concept of adaptive evolution was obsolete when faced with pure human creativity and the refusal to accept that any fight was impossible to win. Captain Maria Santos gripped the arms of her command chair as the destroyer Indomitable rolled through another impossible maneuver. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the smooth efficiency that came from years of training for this exact moment. "Target acquired," called out Lieutenant Zhang from the weapons console. "Two Zaphirian dreadnoughts, range 50,000 kilometers. They are adapting to plasma fire from the council ships." Maria studied the tactical display with the calm focus that had made her one of humanity's best ship commanders. The two bioships were massive things, each one larger than 3 human destroyers. Their hulls were already shifting to counter the energy weapons being used against them. "Recommendations?" she asked her tactical officer. "Standard doctrine would be to engage from long range with our main guns," came the reply. "But their adaptive armor will counter our weapons within minutes." Maria smiled the cold smile that her crew had learned to recognize. It meant she was about to do something that would either be brilliant or get them all killed. Usually both. "Standard doctrine is for people who want to live boring lives," she said. "Helm, plot a course directly between those two dreadnoughts. Maximum speed." The helmsman, a young officer named Parker, turned to stare at her. "Ma'am, that will put us within their bioelectric field overlap. Our shields will not protect us at that range." "Who said anything about shields?" Maria replied. "We are going to use their own defenses against them. Weapons, prepare antimatter spread, full yield. Set for proximity detonation." Around the bridge, her officers exchanged glances. They had trained for crazy maneuvers, but this was beyond anything in the manual. Still, they had learned to trust their captain's instincts. The Indomitable accelerated toward the two bioships like a dart thrown at a target. The Zaphirian vessels, busy adapting to council weapons, did not notice the small human ship until it was already committed to its attack run. "Bioelectric field detected," reported the science officer. "It is interfering with our targeting systems." "Perfect," Maria said. "That means it is interfering with theirs too. Helm, adjust course to use the field interference as cover." The destroyer dove into the space between the two massive bioships. The air on the bridge crackled with static electricity as alien energies washed over their hull. Warning lights flashed as systems struggled to cope with the interference. "We are inside their defensive perimeter," Parker announced. "They cannot target us without hitting each other." "And we cannot miss," Maria added. "Weapons, fire, everything." The Indomitable unleashed its full antimatter payload at point-blank range. The explosion that followed lit up space like a newborn star. Both Zaphirian dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist, their biohulls vaporized by the release of energy. The human destroyer emerged from the fireball with its hull scarred but intact. Around them, the rest of the human fleet was conducting similar surgical strikes against targets that other species considered impossible to defeat. "Damage report," Maria ordered. "Hull plating scorched. Some minor system damage," came the reply. "Nothing that will keep us out of the fight." On the main display, Maria could see the larger battle unfolding. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of wolves, each ship covering the others while they tore apart the Zaphirian formation. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The bioships were trying to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. Every human ship used different weapons based on principles that the Zaphirians had never encountered. Dark matter streams that ignored physical armor. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions. Gravity hammers that turned a target's own mass into a weapon. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "Admiral Chen is coordinating a fleet-wide strike on the Zaphirian command ship." Maria looked at the tactical display to see the massive bioship that served as the enemy flagship. It was easily 10 times the size of any human vessel, its hull covered with weapons that could destroy entire squadrons. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," came the voice over the fleet channel. "The living destroyer is the nexus of their hive mind network. If we take it down, their coordination will collapse. All squadrons attack Pattern Omega." Around the battlefield, human ships began moving into position for the coordinated strike. Maria felt a surge of pride as she watched her fellow captains execute maneuvers that would have been impossible for any other species. Captain Harrison in the cruiser, Defiant, led his squadron in a spiral approach that confused the bioship's targeting systems. Captain Liu in the battleship, Unstoppable, provided covering fire that forced enemy escorts to take defensive positions. Captain Rodriguez in the assault ship, Relentless, punched through the bioship's fighter screen like it was made of paper. But the Zaphirian command ship was adapting faster than its smaller cousins. Its hull was already shifting to counter the human weapons it had observed. Maria could see defensive systems growing like cancer across its surface. "It is learning," her tactical officer observed. "The command ship is incorporating countermeasures for our weapons." Maria nodded. She had expected this. The Zaphirians were not stupid, just limited by their own success. They had become so dependent on adaptation that they could not imagine any other way to fight. "Weapons, prepare our special package," she ordered. Her weapons officer looked confused. "Ma'am, we already used our antimatter spread." "Not that package. The other one." Understanding dawned on the officer's face. Every human ship carried weapons that were not in any official database. Weapons that Admiral Chen had ordered built in absolute secrecy. Weapons that violated several treaties and most common sense. "Singularity torpedo armed," the weapons officer reported. "Targeting the command ship's core." Maria keyed her communicator to the fleet channel. "Admiral Indomitable is in position for special delivery," confirmed Captain Santos. "You are authorized for Package 7 deployment." Maria took a deep breath. Package 7 was a weapon that could crack a planet's crust or collapse a star. Using it against a single ship was like swatting a fly with a nuclear bomb. But the Zaphirian command ship was not a normal target. "Fire," she ordered. The Singularity torpedo left the Indomitable at a significant fraction of light speed. It was a small thing, barely larger than a person, but it contained a miniature black hole held in stasis by technologies that other species would not develop for centuries. The torpedo struck the bioship's hull and disappeared inside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive vessel began to collapse in on itself as the artificial singularity ate it from the inside out. The effect on the Zaphirian fleet was immediate. Without their command ship's coordination, the bioships began attacking each other in confusion. The hive mind network that had made them invincible was gone, leaving 50,000 ships without direction or purpose. Maria watched the enemy fleet tear itself apart and felt a grim satisfaction. The humans had not just won this battle. They had proven that adaptation was not the ultimate evolutionary advantage. Sometimes the best evolution was learning how to break all the rules. War Prime Zechthel felt his connection to the hive mind network dying like a flame going out in vacuum. Through the failing neural link, he could sense the confusion and terror of his scattered fleet. Without the living destroyer to coordinate them, 50,000 bioships were turning on each other in desperate confusion. His own flagship was dying around him. The human weapon had torn through the bio hull like it was made of paper, and now the ship's living systems were shutting down one by one. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the organic walls as they slowly stopped pulsing with life. "Report," he commanded, but his voice echoed in empty corridors. Most of his crew was dead, and the few survivors were too busy trying to escape to answer him. Through the dying ship's sensors, Zechthel watched human marines cutting through his hull with weapons that melted biometal like ice in sunlight. They moved with purpose and efficiency, their powered armor making them look like metal demons in the flickering light. For the first time in his long life, Zekthul felt fear. Not the simple survival instinct that all creatures possessed, but the deep, existential terror that came from realizing everything he believed was wrong. The Zaphirians had conquered dozens of species by adapting to their weapons and tactics. They had thought themselves the ultimate evolution of warfare itself. But the humans had shown them the fatal flaw in that thinking. You could not adapt to something you had never encountered before. And the humans had spent 2 centuries making sure their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The sound of cutting tools grew closer. Zekthul could hear human voices speaking in their harsh language, coordinating their advance through his ship. They were not celebrating their victory or showing mercy to the defeated. They were working with the cold efficiency of professionals doing a job. A section of wall collapsed near his command center, and 3 human Marines entered through the gap. Their armor was scarred from battle, but still functional. The weapons they carried hummed with barely contained energy. One of them spoke, and Zekthul's failing translation systems provided the words. Zaphirian Command Center located. Single occupant appears to be senior officer. Another human replied. Admiral's orders are to secure all command personnel for interrogation. Use restraint protocols. Zekthul looked at the humans with his compound eyes, seeing them clearly for the first time. They were smaller than most galactic species, with soft skin and no natural weapons. But there was something in their movements that spoke of controlled violence and absolute confidence. You cannot understand what you have done, Zekthul said, hoping his words would translate properly. We are evolution itself. We adapt to any threat. We grow stronger from every battle. The lead Marine removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face and cold eyes. When he spoke, his voice was calm but filled with certainty. That is your problem, the human said. You got so good at adapting to what other people could do that you forgot to imagine what they might do instead. Zekthul felt the truth of those words like a physical blow. The Zaphirians had become so focused on reactive evolution that they had lost the ability to create anything truly new. They could only improve on what already existed, but humans were different. They did not just adapt to challenges, they imagined new ways to fight that had never existed before. They turned warfare itself into an art form where creativity mattered more than raw power. What are you? Zekthul whispered. The human Marine smiled without humor. We are what happens when a species spends 200 years learning how to break things that other people think cannot be broken. Through the neural network's dying connection, Zekthul sent one final message to any of his people who might still be alive. It was not a tactical update or a call for reinforcements. It was a warning. We were not defeated by superior evolution, he transmitted. We were destroyed by superior imagination. The connection died, leaving Zekthul alone with his captors. Around them, the bioship continued its slow death as human salvage teams systematically destroyed every piece of Zaphirian technology they could find. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the cleanup operation through the main display. The battle had lasted 17 minutes from first shot to final Zaphirian surrender. It was not the longest fight the human fleet had prepared for, but it had been satisfying. Casualty report, she ordered. Minimal losses, came the reply from her tactical officer. 3 destroyers with hull damage, 1 cruiser with engine problems. No ships lost, fewer than 100 casualties across the entire fleet. Chen nodded. The humans had trained for this battle for 2 centuries, running simulations and developing weapons specifically designed to counter adaptive enemies. The Zaphirians had never stood a real chance. Status of enemy fleet? 47,000 vessels destroyed or disabled. The remaining ships are surrendering or fleeing into deep space. Our pursuit squadrons are tracking them. And the Council fleet? Admiral Kethvar reports that his remaining ships are operational. He is requesting permission to approach our formation. Chen considered this. The galactic species would want answers about where humanity had been and what they had become. Some of those answers would be uncomfortable for everyone involved. Grant permission. Signal Admiral Kethvar that I will meet with him aboard his flagship in 2 hours. The communication came through moments later. Admiral Chen, this is Admiral Kethvar. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for your assistance. But I must ask, what do you want in return? Chen looked out at the stars through the bridge's main window. 2 centuries ago, humanity had been dismissed as primitive warmongers by the very species they had just saved. The galaxy had made it clear that humans were not welcome in civilized space. Now those same species were asking what humanity wanted. It was ironic in a way that Chen found amusing. "What we want, Admiral, is simple," she replied. "We want to be treated as equals, not as primitives or savages. We want a voice in galactic affairs, and we want to make sure that nothing like the Zaphirians ever threatens peaceful worlds again." There was a long pause before Kethavar responded. "Those terms seem reasonable," Chen smiled. Of course they seemed reasonable. After watching human warships tear apart the most dangerous threat the galaxy had ever faced, every species in Council space would be eager to keep humanity happy. "There will be other conditions," she continued. "Technology sharing agreements, trade partnerships, and humans will provide security for any world that requests our protection." She did not need to explain what that last part meant. Everyone who had watched the battle would understand. Humanity was offering to be the galaxy's protector, but they would do it on human terms. The age of human exile was over. The age of human dominance was about to begin. In the depths of space, the wreckage of the Zaphirian fleet drifted cold and lifeless. The species that had thought itself the ultimate evolution of warfare had learned that imagination could defeat adaptation every time. And across the galaxy, other potential threats took note of what had happened at the Nexus Gate. Humanity was back, and they had brought with them weapons that redefined what was possible in war. The galaxy would never be the same.